Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Tea and Crystals podcast. I am T.
And I'm Crystal.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have part 2 of Take Care of Maya, the Netflix documentary here for you all. Crystal has done a wonderful job of breaking this thing down. I'm ready to get into the nitty gritty. We finna get up into this thing. We finna break it down for y'all. But before we do, Crystal, I gotta ask you, how are you?
I'm good. I'm so ready to let our audience know all of what happens in the second half of this documentary. And I'm hoping that we'll get through all of it today. This might be a little bit of a longer episode than our usual just 1 hour, but we're going to make sure you get all the details, because not only do we have what happened in the documentary, but I also have an update. So that's really exciting.
Okay. Without further ado, Crystal, please take it away.
I will. Okay, so the last time we left off in part 1, we had just gotten to the point where Beata was accused of child abuse by Munchausen by proxy. So basically what that is, it's known as medical child abuse. It is a form of child abuse in which a caretaker provides false or exaggerated information, ignoring medical recommendations, and that pattern of behavior causes harm to the child. So Jack said that Dr. Sally Smith, who had come in and basically pretended, I don't want to say pretended, but she didn't identify herself as the investigator for CPS. She basically acted like a nurse or a pediatrician or whatever, and she was asking a bunch of questions and stuff like that. But he said that she basically did a 10-minute interview at most that day. And then in her deposition, Dr. Smith said that there was ample evidence of child abuse and that it appeared the mother, Beata, was the primary perpetrator of the child abuse. So after Dr. Smith left Maya's room, the nurse who was originally helping them before walked in and told Jack he had to leave and that Maya had been placed under state custody. So it happened like that. Beata was accused of over-medicating Maya and that Maya was faking her symptoms. The Kowalskis retained the services of a Dr. M. Salisbury as their lawyer. So Miss Salisbury said that she was impressed by Beata's knowledge of Maya's condition and that she was concerned with how Maya would do being isolated from her family. And she honestly couldn't understand why the Department of Children and Families was doing this. But Miss Salisbury did explain to the Kowalskis that these types of cases were actually very common. CPS investigators have incredible powers in removing children from their families because all they have to prove is that there could be harm to the child. So in Florida, the child welfare system is privatized. When Sally Smith reviewed Maya's case, she was an employee for the Suncoast Center, which assists in investigation child abuse allegations in the Pinellas County, which is where All Children's Hospital happened to be located. So children in Pinellas County are almost 2.5 times more likely to be removed from their families than the state average. Ms. Salisbury stated that she now refers to it as the child welfare industry. She states when CPS first started, it was due to things like excess corporal punishment, children being beaten, burned, or sexually abused. And while those are still happening, in recent years, a new diagnosis has been popping up, which is medical child abuse, where any parent who is bringing their child in with an unusual illness, or that they go to like 5 different doctors because they're trying to figure out what's wrong with their child, can be accused of doctor shopping and exposing the child to unnecessary medical procedures to fulfill their own mental health issues. Miss Salisbury did say that upon meeting Beata, she felt she could be a little too direct sometimes. And she also felt that maybe that caused some of the doctors to take offense. And she believes that someone at the hospital got offended, and that's when the conflict arose, which personally, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what happened. I feel like she just got, like we've said, Beata is known for being very direct. And I feel like by her telling them what they needed to be doing, that's exactly what happened. Someone got offended, and this is how this abuse allegations began. So Dr. Kirkpatrick, who was the physician that originally diagnosed Maya with CRPS, said that as soon as he was made aware of Sally Smith's investigation, he called her immediately and he explained to her, this is what the diagnosis is. If you want to see the objective evidence, I got it for you. He said he told her this on the phone. She then wrote up a report 2 days later, but did not include any of Dr. Kirkpatrick's information that he provided. He told her if she moved forward with this, it would not only be a catastrophic outcome for the child, but a permanent injury to the whole family. During Dr. Sally's deposition, a lawyer did ask her if she was warned that her investigation would lead to needless and permanent harm to the child and family. To which she replied, I don't know if he specifically said that, but I know he documented some things some days later about our conversation. She said she can acknowledge that when an investigation for child abuse and neglect, she can acknowledge that while an investigation for child abuse and neglect may cause some distress to a family, she was asked if that's how she would classify what happened to the Kowalskis, which was distress. And she said, I don't know. You would have to ask them how they responded to the whole thing. So several hours after Maya was taken into state custody, Beata records herself trying to call Maya in the hospital, at which point a nurse tells her she is not allowed to speak to her until after the court date the next day. She was only allowed to be given updates for her health. After the phone call, Jack and Beata did get into a fight. Again, Beata recorded this argument, and you could hear Jack yelling at her, telling her to stop talking about pain meds. Beata was insisting it is her right to know about her child and she doesn't want her to suffer. He yells that they will hold it against her and that he wants to see his daughter. You can also hear little Kyle begging his mom to listen to his dad, to which she replies, Daddy isn't always right. And the attorneys advise Beata to remain calm because nothing shows that they are making up a disease and that they are exaggerating the situation. So the first phase in a dependency case is the sheltering hearing, where the judge will decide where a child will be placed. They will have the CPS investigators' preliminary report and have lawyers of hearsay. For example, the doctors say this, the doc said that, etc. It's all admissible. So it is easy for them to win, making families very, very vulnerable to the system.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. The way that the system was or still is set up there just lends itself for these families to really suffer, which is something you probably gonna get into later on because they do touch on that later in the documentary. But you see across the country privatization of different sectors where you see it, handled by the state in different states and, handled by the state in different countries, how much it's abused when it's privatized because, there's an incentive to make money. And anywhere that there's an incentive to make money, somebody's being abused, shortcuts are being taken, and there's a lot of pressure on people to perform because the more you perform, the more money you make.
Yeah.
So that in itself is wild to me that the system is set up like that in Florida, but I mean it's Florida, so that is what it is. Shout out to Beata so far. Beata is she keeps it real. She don't I appreciate a Beata. A Beata don't beat around the bush. A Beata gonna tell you what it is straight up. She don't use too many words. Like she gets straight to the point. And if you step on her toes, she gonna let you know, right then and there, which I appreciate. Shout out to Beata. And we're gonna see some more of that as we move through the story, because I ain't gonna say what I want to say, but Beata was a real one. However, I think, in the argument that her and Jack had, her husband, I do think he had a point at that point, because she did take it too far. I think, at a point where you should have, really like Beyonce said, everybody on mute, hush it up, collect your thoughts, write this stuff down. She was doing the right thing by documenting everything, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she used the tools that she should have used, because I can't say that either. She's not used to, because she wasn't originally from the US, so she's not used to that. A certain segment of Americans have a very good way of pointing things out that may be technically true, but aren't, socially, you know, um, the most socially relevant for the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they kind of use that to point out technicalities, in things that you say. They analyze every word, and then they can turn that against you. They be like, they said this, and technically this, that, and this, and that, and this, and that. And she could have taken information and what they were saying and investigated. It would have taken more time. But Beata was so real. She wasn't finna waste that time because her daughter was, um, hurting. So I understand why she didn't mince words. But Jack had a point in that argument.
I agree with you on that. I do think Jack did have a point in that argument. I mean, he was just telling her, you need to stop asking their questions you're asking at this moment, because that is what is causing them to not allow us to see her right now. That's what's gotten her taken away, essentially. But I also do feel like what her lawyer said was true as well. I feel like somebody got offended, somebody got butthurt over whatever it was, however she was acting, and they wanted to find a reason. I don't want to say that they wanted her to be a child abuser, but I do think it played a part in the reason why they jumped to this conclusion. Because while I do think it's probably a very difficult thing to suspect that a child might be being abused, as we're going to learn in this story, it happens quite a bit at this particular hospital, and a lot of families get affected by it and are then later cleared for it. So it has to make you wonder, what is their criteria for child abuse? If you see a couple of bruises on a child, is that, oh, that must mean they're being abused? Is it that, or is it something that really sets off their radar soar? Yeah, I don't want to like down hospitals and doctors, because it is very important that if they do suspect child abuse, that they report it. But I get the feeling that it's that in itself can be abuse as well. So the Quality Shelter hearing takes place on October 14th, 2016. And at this point, Maya has been in the hospital for 7 days, and she's been in custody for 1 day. So the judge states, in light of allegation, it's appropriate that a no contact order be issued at the time between mother and Maya. So that means, I believe that meant that it was just between Maya and her mother, that she was not allowed to have contact. But I do believe that Jack was going to be given like visitation, like he could still contact her, because at the end of the day, these allegations are really against Beata, not Jack and Beata. So after hearing the judge's order of no contact, Beata immediately passes out in the courtroom. Maya was placed in custody at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, and her treatment regimen was changed because they said Beata had Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The judge also ordered that Beata had to go to psychological evaluation, which she did. The findings stated that there was no evidence that would support the conclusion that Beata falsified her daughter's medical condition. It did find she had an adjustment disorder with depressed mood for having her child taken away. So while talking to a parent advocate, Beata was told, this is the thing about these cases. They're not fair and they don't care about evidence. The best way to get your kid back is to cooperate. Beata tries to tell her that doctors told her they couldn't diagnose Maya, and the parent advocate stated, I'm sure that's true. It doesn't really matter. Judges don't care if a hospital is wrong nearly as much as they care about whether or not you're going to put your child in danger. The judge's only concern is if I send this kid back to mom and dad, are they going to kill her? This is why the best way to get the case to end successfully is to convince everybody that you had changed your mind and will do whatever they say. Once you get your child back, you leave the hospital and never return. Beata asked, in the meantime, I'm going to let my daughter deteriorate more, which the advisor then says, what other choice do you have? Either she suffers now for a little while and eventually you get her back, or she suffers forever and never get her back. And this was all recorded by Beata. Again, amazing. So Maya says no one ever told her directly why she was being separated from her parents. She had to figure out, even though she was only 10. So even though she asked so many questions, she was never given an answer other than you can't talk to them. So 4 days into Maya being in state custody, Jack is finally allowed to see Maya, though he had a lot of rules he had to follow, such as not being allowed to ask how she was doing or about her treatments. He couldn't answer when she was coming home and couldn't really talk about her mother. The visit was very brief and difficult because he could see her condition just going downhill. He took notes of Maya stating she was hurting and she didn't like how they did her physical therapy. She stated she misses her old physical therapy with the pool. Jack also notes that she was getting worse. Her feet were turning in more. She had more lesions and she was getting weaker and weaker. Jack wasn't allowed to tell Beata anything about his visits with Maya, which is what he did. He followed those rules because he was scared that he would lose his privileges of seeing Maya, and ended up leaving her alone again. Kyle states when he would visit his sister that she would appear like she didn't want to be there. During his deposition, Jack stated the doctors tried to say everything was in Maya's head. The documentary then shows texts between doctors and Sally Smith. So one text read, FYI, I just went to see Maya. I watched her use her feet to push herself several feet in her wheelchair in her room. Sally replies, fortunately, at 10 years old, she can't perform the charade effectively 24/7 and doesn't even know if she's making psychological mistakes. I'm coming to take some pictures of her affected legs, and she used parentheses under affected legs for court Tuesday. When Sally Smith is asked, do you think she improved from the time when she was admitted to the hospital, which she replied yes. She states she gained weight, she was weaned off numerous medications, and she was no longer having abdominal pain. Maya was asked from the time that she came to the hospital, did her pain ever improve? She replied, no, not really. Like I was in constant pain and with CRPS when left untreated and without proper physical therapy and medication, and also without proper support system, it's almost impossible to improve. So even though doctors came in and out of her room, she was never listened to. She was basically ignored. Dr. Kirkpatrick states it wasn't the first time he had seen this scenario. After a few days at the hospital, they refused to give her ketamine. So without the high doses ketamine treatment, she had virtually no mobility in her legs at all. That's where you get blood clots forming, which can then break off, go to the lung, and it could be fatal. He said he felt it was important for Beata to know the seriousness of this, so he emailed her warning her that the diagnosis of fictitious disorder makes it easier for children's hospitals to conceal their incompetence in the care and treatment of Maya, and that he predicted it would lead to prolonged unbearable pain, resulting in the death of her daughter.
Yeah. Homegirl she was really suffering in the hospital. If you watch the documentary, you see how many hours she spent just laying in the bed. I mean, she was there for a considerable amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they just let her lay in that bed, they didn't really show in the documentary, her having too many spasms or like, anything like that. It was really just footage of her laying in the bed. So I don't know if they just didn't have access to those, if the hospital didn't give them access to that kind of stuff. Because I really wonder what they did for her, in those moments when she was having those flare ups of pain. But it's really sad to see how the doctors treated her. They I can't imagine being in that kind of pain and stuff, and you're in the hospital, you think you're supposed to get help, especially being that young, and then the doctors are just like, girl, get over it, essentially.
Yeah.
Like that's that's horrible. So
Well, um, and I feel bad because without her parents there, she doesn't have anyone to advocate for her. When you're a child and you go to the
mhm.
hospital, it's your parents that tell the doctor, that ask the questions, that explain things that the child isn't really able to do themselves. So without having that advocate, that person whose only concern is their well-being, it's like she said, she was ignored, she wasn't listened to. She was telling them what she was feeling, and they were telling her it's all in her head, it's she's making it up, things like this. And you'll hear later on just some of the things that they did said, which was really horrible to a 10-year-old. But yeah, I feel so bad that while she's in there, she doesn't have an advocate whatsoever. So Beata finally is granted permission to speak with Maya over the phone, though she is not allowed to discuss the case with Maya or anything like that. The phone call is also monitored with someone in the room with Maya listening to the conversation. The social worker primarily involved with monitoring the calls was a woman named Catherine Beatty, who the Kowalskis didn't feel right about. So after Googling her name, they actually came up with an article that showed that Catherine Beatty herself was arrested for child abuse. And the news article stated that she grabbed a 10-year-old boy's head, causing him to fall down. She then placed both her knees on the boy's chest. The boy's face turned red, and he said he couldn't breathe. And according to the affidavit, Beatty replied, "Yes, you can." But despite knowing this, Beata could do nothing about it. So during an audio recording of a conversation between Beata and Maya, Beata states that Beatty interrupted her time with Maya, which caused her, because she could hear Beatty was talking in the background. And when she tells her that she's interrupting her time, Beatty replies, "You need to redirect." She told her that repeatedly. She later found out that those charges that were against Catherine Beatty was dropped, but regardless, it had set off alarm bells with Beata anyways. And in multiple depositions, Maya stated that Beatty would tell her that she was going to go into a foster care home and that her mother was in a mental institution. She also told her she was going to end up adopting Maya. She obviously took a very unhealthy it sounds like she was trying to form some sort of bond, and Maya wasn't having it. So in her deposition, Beatty is asked if she ever sat Maya on her lap, and she said yes. She was asked if she was hugging Maya. She replied, "I think we provide comfort to a lot of kids, so it's probably while she was sitting in my lap, I'm sure I did hug her." She was asked, "Do you think Maya liked you?" She replied, yeah, and I also think that there were times that Maya was very mad because I happened to be the face of the hospital along with the doctors." Maya asked if she remembered being told why they wanted to take photos of her. She said, "Yeah, Kathy came over to my bed and was like, if you want to go to the court hearing, I have to do this." Beatty is asked, risk management made the decision to have these pictures taken of Maya, which she said, yeah, that's what it was, risk management. Maya describes the incident as she was asked to remove her clothes. And this is a back and forth between Maya's deposition and Beatty's deposition. So they're both recalling the same incidents. So Maya was asked to remove her clothes. Beatty said that she was in shorts and a bra and a sports bra. Maya said she was held down and had photos taken of her. And Beatty said they took photos of her arms, her legs, her face, and her stomach. Maya said she was screaming, crying, and yelling no. And Beatty is asked, did she want to take pictures of her like that? She agreed with she did not. Maya said she could not have made it any more clear. And Beatty is asked, but you went ahead and took the pictures of her anyways. And she said, unfortunately, we did. She was then asked if what steps were taken to call the parents and asked if they could take pictures of their child like this. She replied, we didn't call the parents. Maya said she missed Halloween, Thanksgiving, and her birthday. In an audio phone conversation between Maya and Beata, which took place on November 29th, 2016, Maya had been at the hospital at this point under state custody for 47 days at this point. Beata asked her how she's doing, and Maya states she's not feeling well at all. And then you can hear that she's starting to cry a little bit. And she states that she cries all the time and that everything is so hard for her. Her mother asks her if the tramadol she is on helps at all, which Maya says no, not at all. She also says she's getting nothing else for the pain. Beata asked if she received a letter that she had wrote to her. And at that point, Kathy Beatty, who's listening in on the conversation, interrupts her and states that she has no letter from Beata. Beata tells her she sent it to a woman named Charlotte, and then Beatty immediately interrupts her again and says, well, you'll have to talk to Charlotte. So Beata then asks Maya if she spoke to her attorney, which Maya said yes, that he was coming that day. And Beata was really happy to hear that. She said, oh, that's good because you're supposed to be able to talk to your attorney. But then Maya interrupts her and she says, well, actually, she can't speak to him on the phone because she can't call outside. This upsets Beata, obviously, because she immediately tells her she is not in prison or a Nazi camp. She's allowed to make phone calls. And then hearing this, Beatty immediately interrupts her and says, Mom, you just have to ask. She just has to ask a nurse how to do it. That's all. So Maya begins to cry at this point because she misses them and she doesn't understand why any of this is happening. And Beata is trying to comfort her, tells her it's complicated, stay strong, and that she loves her. And then Beatty interrupts her and tells her that tells Beata that they have to go because she has to step into something else. And you can tell in this conversation, Beata is very frustrated with Beatty for the way she's interrupting her, the way she's speaking to her, because the way Beatty is speaking to Beata in these recordings is very, it just doesn't sound nice. Like, it doesn't sound like she likes Beata at all. And I would think that regardless of what investigation is going on, as a social worker, you would have to put on some sort of professionalism where you could speak to a parent that is being investigated and still be able to keep your level head. Like, you shouldn't be letting it known that you don't like this person, especially when you're in front of their child. And in all these recordings where you hear Catherine Beatty speak to Beata, you can tell she does not like Beata, and she does not like the fact that Beata is having these conversations with Maya. So, due to this conversation, Beatty attempts to get Beata's privileges suspended. She wrote that the phone call with the mother that day was damaging for the child and accuses Beata of being inappropriate during the phone conversation. Jack doesn't know if it was her questioning Maya of her treatments or what they were giving her, or certain things that she can't discuss with her daughter. But Jack states this destroyed Beata despite how strong she was. So during this time, Beata was the subject to a pending criminal investigation with the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, which Jack states he was not aware of a pending investigation. He did, however, sit down and give a recorded statement to Detective Graham, though he was unaware that he was being recorded and that he did not give consent to being recorded. During her deposition, a lawyer asked Detective Graham if she told him she was a detective investigating child abuse. She said she would have had her badge on her and gone on and probably identified herself. So, yes, she said she asked if she could interview him, and then they sat down and had a pleasant conversation. Audio is then played from the conversation. So in this audio, Graham asked Jack to tell her about his and Beata's relationship. He says it's like any other marriage with its ups and downs and that they're not going to agree on everything. She asks if they ever disagree on Maya's care. He replies no, that he knows his wife and that she will stay up till 3 in the morning doing research or whatever. He says he then listens to what she says and what the doctor says, and that it's number one is what the doctor says. She asks if Maya is looking for some attention from her mom, trying to please her mom, or, saying something like, Mom wants her to be sick, so I'm going to be sick to please my mom. To which Jack says, I hope not. God, I hope not. This is where you lost points with me, Jack. This was the moment you lost points with me. She said they shouldn't differentiate love and affection and caring for abuse because they could happen in tandem, which Jack says he doesn't agree with. Jack says he doesn't agree with Beata on a lot of things, but he does say that intentionally she would never hurt her children. He said he would swear on his life on that one. Graham asks Jack if he loves his wife, to which he says, I love her, yeah. She is a pushy person, and it's getting worse right now because she doesn't want to cooperate. Graham then says that this is a complicated case and she thinks it's very possible that someone could be looking at criminal charges. She then asks him if he is protective or complicit. He says, protective of my children. She asks if his children are truly his first priority. And he says, I swear on my life, on my children's life, which Grant interrupts and says, I don't care. I'll put you and your wife in jail tomorrow if it meant Maya gets better. And he says, if I did wrong, put me in jail. She says, absolutely. He says, and I'll accept that. Graham then asks, if Maya was released tomorrow, would you be compliant if that child was not to have any contact with her mother? Jack says, yes, in a heartbeat. The Kowalski's lawyer is asked if they wanted Jack to flip on Beata based on this conversation. She said she would assume that they would because it would have made their case easier, and that if he hadn't said he would choose his kids over his wife, that it would have been held against him, and that was the only correct answer. Jack said he went home and he told Beata what happened. She questioned why he would do that, and he said it was because he had nothing to hide. He then told her that they are trying to blame her. This caused a lot of stress in the house and believes she felt very much betrayed.
Can you imagine, number one, having your child held for over 2 months? Well, we haven't gotten there, but at this point, over a month and change, about a month.
I think it is
and
about too much at this point. It's like
it was 40 some days, right?
47, I think, at this point.
47. Okay. So yeah, about like a month and a half.
Yeah, you're right. Math.
I can't imagine having my child, I can't even really talk to my child like that. And, it's an allotted time and different things like that. Just having the state take my child from me, and the fact that it's Florida is just laughable, especially seeing where they are now. Florida has been crazy, but, they're shitting the bed crazy now. So just don't imagine Florida having that much control over my child would be enough for me. For real. In hindsight, Beata should have just went along with the system, whatever she needed to do to get her child back, and then immediately booked it out of Florida. Because obviously that's not the place that you need to be. As far as the CPS lady, she was way too much in the sauce. She was way too emotional. Like I couldn't understand why she was given that position, because essentially she's an investigator, and investigators are supposed to be, non-biased. She has an obvious, glaring, dangerous bias against parents. She's not able to discern, parents who are abusing their children versus parents who are concerned for their children, trying to get them help, which you would think would be the crux of the job. But obviously that was not the case here. She really didn't give a damn one way or the other. She just wanted to make the state their money. She wanted to make her company money by having these kids on the roster. And as far as Jack is concerned, as you said, this is where the turn for me. See, I was already like about Jack, going into the story. Like as we got further and further into the story, it's he was always like an on the fence kind of person to me, like from jump, from when we met him in the documentary. But at this point, when he had this conversation with the investigator, I was like, oh, like he's more concerned about preserving his image as a easygoing go because he was a firefighter. So I'm gonna put him in that same wing as first responder, law enforcement kind of people. Like he was more concerned with preserving that side of himself and a part of the system than he was his family. And I mean, I could see that he saw that there was only one way to get Maya back, and that was to go with the system and do what the system wanted him to do. But at the end of the day, the reason I appreciated Beata so much is because Beata knew she was right, and she stood 10 toes down on it, and she wasn't finna go with the system just for the system's sake.
Facts.
So, sometimes, maybe I relate to her because, I felt like she felt like I felt like she was one of those kind of people who would rather, even if she built the house, she would rather burn that bitch to the ground than to let somebody play in her face, and make her do something that she didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Cause I can suffer from that sometimes where I'm like, you know what, this just ain't it. It ain't what I thought it was finna be. So I just rather let it go. I'd rather speak my mind and just let the chips fall where they may than play the game because the game ain't worth it at the end of the day. If I know what I'm saying is true, but
Yeah, I agree with you. And like I said, this is where Jack was losing me a bit. And I will say that I, it like you said, it had been about a month and a half at this point. I can't imagine all of what he was feeling, and with everything that was going on, I'm sure he probably was getting to the point where he just wanted to roll over and just let it be done. And so I get that, but I do feel like he was willing to do that at almost at the expense of his wife a little bit, because at the end of the day, it wasn't an investigation against him. It wasn't him that was having, limited phone calls. Like I think he was still allowed to see uh Maya at this point. Like he was still able to go visit Maya, and see her face to face. Beata was the only one who was only allowed to have phone conversations. So it was very obvious by their stipulations which parent was becoming the scapegoat in this. And it was almost like he was kind of willing to go with it. Of course, after everything is said and done, he obviously feels very different now. But in that moment, it almost seemed like he was willing to just step aside and let the chips fall wherever they fall, like Timmy said. So me personally, I think I completely understand why Beata would feel betrayed at this point, because I mean she kind of was, So on December 15th, 2016, Maya had been in the state custody for 63 days. A judge asked Beatty to reiterate that she felt Maya was happy and thriving under her care at the hospital. Beatty said yes, because Maya was moving her legs and hands without any pain. She said she would go downstairs and play the piano and would often move herself around the hospital. She said they saw her getting better. The judge asked Maya during her deposition if she had a response to that, which she states, CRPS is a disease, and every day it looks a little bit different. There are certain days that I could do certain things, and there are other days where I can't do those things. So, depending on the days, it's going to look different. So, yes, they were wrong. Beatty states, when we look at pain and when I see kids in pain, Maya never showed some of the symptoms that we see other kids in pain having. And we said this in part 1. I feel like because this child had been through such intense pain for so long, just trying to find her original diagnosis, that she probably built up a bit of a pain tolerance. And so for her, unless it was very, very extreme, she was able to seemingly hide it better. And also, I think that at this point, she's now been in the hospital for at least 2 months. And she has stated multiple times that she doesn't feel like she's being listened to, that they're ignoring her. So I wonder how many times she tried to tell the hospital she's in pain, she's not feeling good, she's hurting, and they dismissed it as in, no, you're fine. You know, here's some tramadol, you're good, you're fine. And so in their recollection of the events, they're able to justify saying, no, she was fine, she was moving around, she was good, she wasn't feeling that much pain. I think their memory of it is skewed so that they don't have to feel guilty for ignoring this child. So Maya wrote a note to the judge because there was about to be another hearing, saying, thanking him for taking on her case, and that he knows she wants to go home. She says she's been feeling terrible the last few days and that she had been getting worse and worse. All she wants for Christmas is her family. She writes that she cries every day and it makes her feel sad. She writes that she never got to say her goodbyes to her mom. And she writes that she prays every day that she will be able to go home and that she needs his help to do that. In the middle of December 2016, there was a status conference hearing scheduled, which apparently they had multiple of these types of hearing throughout Maya's stay. So a new co-counsel was brought on. Her name was, now I'm going to get this wrong, Verenia Van Ness. She argued, I don't know if that was right. She argues for the Kowalskis in audio recording that Maya had been diagnosed with CRPS and that what her parents were having her treated for was CRPS, and that constitutionally these parents have the right to treat their child as they see fit. Judge Haworth, who is a judge presiding over this, says the doctors say that CRPS is one of the diagnoses, and they still have Dr. Sally Smith who's saying something different. Ms. Salisbury said this was a huge power struggle and that no matter what they did, this court repeatedly sided with the hospital staff and Dr. Sally Smith. Dr. Sally Smith's testimony weighed very heavily with this judge. Almost like regardless of what Dr. Sally Smith said, her word was the only word that was going to be properly heard. During the hearing, Van Ness states, it's not up to this court or those people to decide what the proper diagnosis or treatment is. It's her parents, and that we shouldn't even be making that decision. We shouldn't even be here. The judge replies for her to dial it down. Maya's other attorney requests to ask another question, to which the judge agrees. And the attorney asks if there was any way, just momentarily, if Maya could see her mother to give her mother a hug. At this point, Maya's been in the hospital for 2 months. It's literally 2 weeks, maybe, before Christmas. And she hasn't seen her mother in all this time and has only been able to speak to her, which at this point, I think her phone conversations got revoked because of Beatty's document. So she hasn't even been speaking to her mom. And when she is requested for Maya to be able to see her momentarily so she can at least get a hug, the judge denies the request. Salisbury says that it never made any sense to her why she was denied giving her child that hug, and that when they left the courthouse that day, that Beata was devastated. She says the one thing she knows to this day is that none of them can get that hug back now. That hug is gone. When asked if she thinks if Beata had been able to give Maya that hug, if things would be different, Salisbury replies, "Yes, I do. I do." So on January 8th, 2017, Maya has been in state custody for 87 days. Kyle and Jack decide to go to a birthday party on this day, while Beata stayed home saying she was going to sleep because she had a migraine headache. Several hours later, Jack and Kyle returned home. They noticed that her bedroom door was shut and assumed she was sleeping. They decided to sit down and watch some TV. Later that evening, Beata's brother, Peter, came over. Jack said Peter went into the garage and suddenly there was a scream he would never forget. It was his name in Polish, Jacek. Jack said he screamed it so loud that he just knew. Beata hung herself in the garage. She was 42 years old. During the 911 call, you can hear Kyle in the background crying, "Mommy, no, Mommy, no." During an audio recording of the police questioning Jack receives a phone call from his attorney, Deborah Salisbury, which they allow him to take. So you can hear their conversation a little bit. Salisbury tells Jack she's so sorry that the judge was so cold. Jack replies that he knows it's because he turned her down, that just killed her. He said all the way home, that's all she talked about. Before she died, Beata wrote the judge a note saying, "Your heart is made out of iceberg. By taking the side of the hospital and DCF, you have destroyed my family, my marriage, you have put us in bankruptcy, and you still denied me to see my daughter in court today. Further, you let them continue to destroy her even more slowly each day. My daughter will never be who she was before October 13th, 2016. I hope you will take responsibility for my daughter's physical deconditioning, worsening of her CRPS, and that eventually will lead to her slow, painful death," which was the exact sentence that Dr. Kirkpatrick had wrote to Beata, warning her that if she didn't get Maya out of the situation, that's what would happen, in his opinion. In her suicide note, she writes, "Please take care of Maya and tell her how much I love her every day. Please tell Kyle also that I love him very much, and I hope that he grows up to be a strong, good man, has a great future, and stays close to God. I'm sorry, but I no longer can take the pain of being away from Maya and being treated like a criminal. I cannot watch my daughter suffer in pain and keep getting worse. It's been 3 months today of Maya not being home. I love you all." Texts between doctors were shown during this time. The first doctor texts, "Learned today that ketamine girl's mom committed suicide yesterday. Sorry to say my prediction was correct." The second doctor replies, "OMG, this is terrible. I know we did the right thing, but this is really fucked up. I feel bad." The first doctor replies, I had another mother do the same thing. We definitely did the right thing for the child."
Disgusting. Disgusting. Is it's one thing to see it in a documentary, but it's another thing, when you read it, like the words really settle into you, like the words were really intentional.
I'm getting choked up.
I know I could hear it. Listen, the whole time that you was reading, like that whole last part, as soon as you got to the hug part, I was over here like, keep it together. Because especially when you have kids, like you be thinking about your kids, and I could not imagine. Like I couldn't imagine. Have you ever seen the movie? I don't know what the name of the movie is, but it's with Denzel Washington. And his son has some type of disease, and they need to.
John Q.
And he's like, was it John Q? Where he's holding the hospital hostage to get his son treated? It would have been a John Q situation for me. It would have been a John Q situation for me because I'm trying to be good. Ain't no way in this world y'all finna just like lock my child up in this hospital. I can't have no contact with my child, and I ain't done nothing wrong. I feel like Beata's lawyers should have prepared her better for how that case was going to go in front of the judge,
Mhm.
especially dealing with a state employee, even though this lady is not a state employee. At best, she's a state contractor because she's working for a private company, and that company is contracted to the state.
Mhm.
She is not a state employee, and that judge was treating her, giving her the privilege of a state employee. Because anytime you have a court case, if you're going up against a state and the state is bringing on, witnesses that work for the state, baby, you can kiss your ass goodbye. Like it's not finna go in your direction. Very,
Mhm.
very, very rarely will it go in your direction because as impartial as judges are supposed to be, they're always biased towards their own.
Mhm.
Um, but it's extremely sad. I don't know. Like I remember when I was watching a documentary, I was like, why did they leave her there by herself?
Yeah.
Knowing the state that she was in. I get that you don't want to put your life on pause. You want to keep things normal for the son as much as you can, especially with everything going on. You want to go to the birthday party, get him out there, get his mind off it for a little while. But I don't me personally, if I knew that my spouse was going through it like that, because I probably would have been going through it the same, which makes me look at Jack even more sideways. I'm like, why are you so even keeled about this? Like, I get that you're thinking because I can see why he would be so even keeled because he's being logical about it. A, B gets me to C. But where is the emotion for your child? Like, why are you so okay with the state holding your child hostage? If the only thing to me would be that he didn't trust his wife, he didn't trust the doctors that gave her the original diagnosis. Like he was really like going with whatever the state said because he was in that system for so long that he is kind of indoctrinated to just go along with what they say because they know best. Um, but it's so sad that she went out like that, feeling that way, getting no resolution, like knowing how much she loved her kids, knowing how much she was fighting for Maya throughout the whole documentary is just it just puts you in the frame of mind to start to understand like how much of a dark place she was in, where she was like, you know, suicide is preferable to seeing this thing to the end because obviously she saw no end in sight. So yeah, God bless her. God bless her. Um, and as far as these texts between the doctors, the fact that he called Maya ketamine girl, like that isn't there. I believe there is a board to have doctors reviewed and have, I don't know if they have licenses, but have them put up before the board,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
for them to practice medicine and stuff. Like, it's whoever Dr. One is should be investigated because I wouldn't want nobody talking like that. I mean, you can be a human, but at the end of the day, like, you have to have some level of humanity to refer to me as something other than, or Maya something other than ketamine girl.
Right. Yeah. I agree with you. Um I mean, seeing it how we saw it, it automatically, like, you shouldn't be doing that. But I mean, they're human. They have their off time. They're having their conversation. I'm sure they're never expecting their conversation to be shown to courts or whatever. But yeah, you're basically dehumanizing her by referring to her in that regard. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what's going on with everything, Maya is always the innocent one in this case. She should be the one you're treating with the utmost respect. You know, if you truly believe she's being abused and that her mother is putting all these things in her head, you know, you should have more sympathy towards her. And it didn't sound like they did in any way. Um and as for her dad, I'm not sure. I don't think he was okay. Like I don't think he was indifferent to his child being, or necessarily acting like his child was being held captive, but I do feel like he was just tired of it. Like he just wanted it to be over with. However, it needed to be over with. So maybe he put on an air of indifference because he was trying to convince himself that, you know, if they just shut up about it, that they'll get their child back sooner. And I don't know how Beata was acting in those days. I mean, obviously she was acting upset because he said, you know, he could tell when she came back from that court date that she was very upset. But by this point, weeks had passed. I mean, almost a month was coming up to it being passed. This was January 8th. Her court date had happened in the middle of December. So they had, you know, they went through Christmas, they went through New Year's, and it had been at least a week after that too. So you know, maybe maybe Beata was just good at putting on a happy front, you know, especially for Kyle. So you don't think about the signs that they're showing until after the bad things happen. And it's when that happens that you're then like, this was a sign. Like, she obviously wasn't well. I shouldn't have left her alone. Things like that, you know.
I don't think that John was indifferent to
Jack.
the
His name is
state
Jack.
keep or Jack, whatever. Jack.
John is the movie.
Oh, sure, yeah, yeah. Jack, I don't think he was indifferent to the state holding Maya, but I do think he was submissive to them. Like he did. I mean, from the beginning, because if it was just the end where he was just like, you know, I want to get this over with, done, da da da. But from the beginning of the story, from when she first went into the hospital, like he never put up a fight.
Yeah, I get
Anytime
that.
that I'm sure he was there for the appointments and stuff, even when she was going to Dr. Fitzpatrick, I think his name was. He won't featured in none of them videos and nothing like that. Like it seemed like he really deferred to Beata for everything,
Mm-hmm.
and he was along for the ride. And then when shit got bumpy, he deferred to the state instead of his wife, who had put in all this leg work.
Yeah.
Um, so that's why I'm coming from on that. Like I don't. He really rolled over for the state, and you know, to your point, you know, talking about, you know, maybe they didn't see the signs and whatever. But just thinking about the time of the year today, and like
Mm-hmm.
it's like you say, it's Christmas, it's New Year's, it's the holiday season, and your daughter been locked up for months at this point. Um, and there's no you just got horrible news right before Christmas, knowing your child ain't coming home. You know, I feel like that would have made me even more vigilant. Like
Yeah.
we right after the holidays, right after getting terrible news, you know, and there's no end in sight. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know that I could have. I don't know. I don't know.
I see what you're saying.
Because you see
Yeah.
her deteriorating mentally, and we don't know what happened that week. Maybe she had a really bad spell with the CPS people or whatever. But I just, for me, I don't know if I could have left her at that house by herself.
Yeah. Well, Jack does state that he believes the reason why Beata did what she did was because it was the only way they were going to get Maya back. And I'm going to try and get through this without getting so emotional and crying, because I'm empathetic. And so I'm feeling the pain. And plus, you can just, this portion of the documentary was so heartbreaking, from Kyle screaming in the background to even Jack and his emotions. But of course, most of all with Maya when we see her. So yes. So like I said, Jack truly believed that the reason why she did it is because she felt this was going to be the only, if she took herself out of the equation, that Maya would finally be able to come home. And unfortunately, it seemed like that was the case, because shortly after Beata's death, Jack was given permission to take Maya to a specialist in Rhode Island, a Dr. Chopra. After doing an evaluation on her, he concluded that Maya did indeed have CRPS. Dr. Chopra sent his report to the courts. Not long after that, on January 13th, 2017, 5 days after Beata's death, and 92 days in state custody, Maya was released back into Jack's custody. It's at this point in the documentary that it flashes forward 4 years to their present time. And you can see Maya and her family, filming the documentary about her experience and her continued fight with the hospital with Sally Smith, and what they did to her and her family. In Maya's first words in the documentary, 4 years after her ordeal, she speaks of her mother as being very compassionate, loyal, and intelligent. Maya states that after 3 months of being held captive and being told she could go back to her family and have a sense of normalcy, she felt like all of her and her family's prayers had been answered. However, in doing so, she lost the most important person in her life, someone she never even got to say goodbye to. While crying, she states she always thought she would be able to see her again, even if it took an entire year. After her release in 2017, the family had to follow certain instructions from courts, such as no ketamine treatment, so they had to take things slow. This took Maya over a year of physical therapy to get her from a wheelchair to crutches, and then another year for her to be able to walk around. However, she still had a lot of pain. Despite all she had accomplished, she can relapse anytime. While she can walk, Maya still has impairments in her lower extremities. So while she has made great progress, she still has CRPS and will have to continue to live with that diagnosis. Jack states that he misses Beata dearly, and it's difficult to understand where her mind was and where she thought that was, and how she thought that was the only way out for her daughter. He also states he has anger here and there, because it's hard to play both roles, and nothing can replace her mother. So that is where we are going to leave it today. As much as we wanted this to be a 2-part, obviously we cannot fit everything into 2 parts. So there will be obviously a part 3 where we will end it. It will be the conclusion. We will we'll be able to finish it. So we hope you guys will tune in so you can hear more about the aftermath of Beata's sacrifice.
Yes, and there are some families who were affected. So y'all are going to want to stick around for that, because the story gets even deeper from here. Just when you thought it couldn't get no crazier, we are just starting to get through the surface of how deep this thing runs. So we thank y'all for sticking with us this far. Make sure you tune into part 3, because it's finna get good. But until then, if you want to see our beautiful faces and how we've been reacting to this story so far, please head over to the YouTube channel. If you have anything to say about what you've heard so far, please leave us a comment in our YouTube comment section. We would love to interact with you over there. Go to YouTube and search Tea and Crystals Podcast. You can also find us on the TikTok. Go have a conversation with Crystal over there at Tea and Crystals Podcast. Find us on Facebook. We have all of our sneak peeks that are posted there. We also have our Reddit rabbit hole stories that are posted there after every episode. And we also have announcements for when new episodes drop on the YouTube and our podcast platforms. We also want to see you in the comments over there on Facebook because we really, really want to have conversations with you about this story over there. So please go find us on Facebook at TN Crystals Podcast. Go find us on the Instagram. You will find a bunch of reels over there with all of our content at TN Crystals Pod. We also have in our pinned stories over there an anonymous question platform where you can go over there and leave us some anonymous questions that we would love to answer and read you about. If you also want to send us an email with questions, comments, and concerns, you can keep the comments and concerns to yourself. But if you have any questions, you can send them over to tandcrystal at gmail.com. We would love to give you some terrible advice if you would like some. So you can find us at TEAANDCRYSTAL at gmail.com. Crystal, you got anything else for the people before we get up out of here?
Nope. I hope to see you guys next week for our conclusion. I think you're really going to, I wanted to say enjoy, but because it's not really
you gonna get the grand finale, the conclusion to this story, and I know you want it.
Exactly.
I know you want it. It's no question in my mind.
Exactly. So stick around.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.